Welcome to the Mortgage Podcast, where we give tactics, strategies, and inspiration to get you to 10 plus loans per month. We talk a lot about how to make a ton of money in mortgage while also being happy and thriving in your personal life. If you want to be a mortgage millionaire, you're in the right place. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mortgage Podcast with Todd Screema, where we try and get every single loan officer to 10 loans a month. That's the mindset. That's the goal. This is more of a strategic short one called 3 Lessons from 2 Billionaires. So let me describe that. In the last 3 months, I've had the pleasure of really getting to know at a deep level. One person is for sure a billionaire. The other one is close. So he's not quite a billionaire, but he'll probably be there next year. Now, I don't say that to impress you, but I find that success is not an accident. When you see someone who has done a lot of things and they've had a lot of failure, they're more wise because they've learned to correct things that they failed at, things that they weren't as good at, and we can really learn from them. So I don't mean to suggest because someone's a billionaire, that means that there's some great person that we should bow down to. I don't mean that at all. I simply look at it logically and say, well, that person has done a great job. This one gentleman that I'm thinking of has had 72 exits from companies, 72, and he's 44 years old. So obviously learned a lot, right, about contract law, about strategy, about people skills, right? Just things like that. So there is lessons there, and I like studying people. I think the best way to learn is to learn from people that are ahead of us and doing things better than us and have been doing it at that level for quite a while. Right? In other words, you don't accumulate that amount of wealth like in 2 years, right? It's, these people have been really active learners and in business for 20 years or so, and they've gotten there faster than most people. And so I like to study them. So here's what I learned. The first one is, it may be kind of obvious, but I think it's something that we can do, right, at our level. That is to be very clear and direct. There's not much in the middle. There's not much like, I'm going to get back to you, because that wastes time to them. They're very much, hey, I'm going to wax on or I'm going to wax off. I don't mean rude. Neither one of these, they're the opposite of rude. They're both very humble. So it's not rude. That's what I think people think. This is not being rude to people. This is being clear. It's kind of like 1 Minute Manager stuff. If you've ever read that book, it's a 1 hour read. What it teaches you to do is to be clear and direct in the moment that things happen. That's really the thesis of the book. So I'll give you an example. If your loan officer assistant was supposed to get something done and they didn't, don't be mad about it. Just say, hey, Sherry, I told you to do that by 2 o'clock. It's now 4 o'clock and not done. Please don't let that happen again. You with me? That's 1 Minute Manager. They've learned that skill. It's not, let's dilly-dally around. Let me get back to you in a week and then not get back to you. Let me pretend I'm going to do a deal, but then not really do a deal. They're very clear, transparent, direct, and honest. And that is something that I strongly encourage any salesperson to learn, because a lot of it is what causes people to waste a bunch of time and also cause a bunch of mistrust. There was a gentleman that interviewed with someone. I was the second interview, and he said, hey, at the end of the conversation, he asked me, do you think I'll get hired? And I said, with all due respect, no. This is just last week. And he's like, oh, really? I didn't expect you to say that. Why is that? I said, bud, your production's not too good and your English is your second language and it's hard to understand you. And I don't think you're all of a sudden going to do great. And that's going to be my report back to the manager. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm disappointed, but then listen, but thank you for being honest. I'm disappointed, but thank you for being honest. Now, he could have gotten upset and hung up on me, but then the next day he'd be like, he's kind of right. My production is low. I do struggle with English as my language. It would have sunk in. So not being rude, but not being so concerned about the outcome of how the person feels as much, but to be honest and direct and transparent with them. So they both have that at a very high level. The second thing is always be selling. So I called one of these gentlemen. Well, actually, okay, I got 2 stories. I called one the Saturday before last, and I hadn't gotten back to him, and I texted him. I said, but can I call you on Saturday? Like I'm slammed. He says, yeah, sure. So I call him on Saturday. I said, hey, what are you doing? He says, I'm at the office. I said, no, again, very well-to-do, both these men. And I'm like, oh, you're at the office. What are you doing? He says, I'm working on a deal. This is a big one. He tells me about the deal. So now the other gentleman, I call him on a Sunday. About 2 Sundays ago, I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm making recruiting calls. I'm like, you're a billionaire. You're making recruiting calls. So I'm not saying work weekends. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm just saying they were both, I'm calling them on the weekends and they're both selling like for several hours on a weekend. And I happen to know both these gentlemen, they sell every day, every minute of their lives. Like it is nonstop. And I'm not saying you have to be that intense, but I am saying if you got an 8-hour workday, you got to be selling 5 or 6 hours. And if you can get it to 6, that would be awesome, right? So always be selling. And both these individuals exemplify that, okay? Then the third one is they're very strategic. In other words, what is that famous saying that good hockey players know where the puck is going? They know where the puck is going. So let me translate this into loans. So if you think about it, I don't think it's a secret that mortgage rates, have come down a bit, right? Maybe a high of 7.5. Now they're, except for recently, but they're around 6.25. So people are pinned up in their houses, right? With their, say, 3% interest rates. They want to, and they've been that way for about 4 years. It's not rocket science that they're going to need cash out loans. So you should probably be right. The puck's going to your database. And I think that mortgage industry is seeing this, where you're seeing a bunch of cash out loans. And they're also doing a lot of purchases. Why? Because they've been stuck in their homes and they're kind of sick of looking at their homes. Now they got 4 kids instead of 3 and they need another bedroom. So, that's knowing where the puck is going. I've got a loan officer right now that's really good at AI. And I said, Bud, all the realtors are starving for AI. Host some classes about this. So he started doing it. He sells out every time. Like he can't teach realtors enough AI, and he's target marketing the good realtors to come. So that is just understanding, hey, realtors struggle with AI. They're not very good at software, most of them. So let me teach them how to get into this and how they can use it in their business, right? So being more strategically minded. I got to be careful of what to say here. This one gentleman, so I got 2 stories and I got to be very general with this. One of the guys just made about $1 billion on an acquisition, knew that this company was in trouble. He knew how to get them and he swooped in and got them, right? So it's kind of a complicated story, but it's really not. He knew that this company was in trouble. He knew that this other company was trying to buy him, but didn't have the cash. He had the cash, swooped in and bought him for 50% of value. That's being strategic, right? This other gentleman found a way where his background is investing, right? Grew up on Wall Street. And he found a way where people that own parts of, say, private companies, they can't, there's share restrictions on these things. And he's like, yeah, but some of these people, say I'm an original founder of Intel, I'm just making this up, and I'm 90 years old, my Intel stock is worth 100 million. He goes to him and says, hey, if I work it out with the board, would you be willing to sell your 100 million in shares for 70 million? And you can get it into your estate before you pass and your heirs won't have to worry about Intel stock, right? So no one's ever done that before at the level that he's doing it. It's made him super wealthy. So that's just him using his strategic brain and saying, hey, what's a problem I can solve? Oh, there's a bunch of people that own shares that are restricted and I could get pre-approval to do this and then buy their shares at a discount and resell them at a profit, right? So that's just very strategic to think that way. So people are like, well, Todd, how do I think that strategically? I would say pay attention to patterns. Tony Robbins talks about this a lot. Like pay attention to patterns of life. It's like the mortgage industry. Typically the mortgage industry, if you look at patterns, this is oversimplified, but it kind of looks like this. 10-year cycle. 6 years is like kind of normal market. 2 years is a boom market. 2 years is a really bad market. Like every 10 years, that cycle kind of repeats. Now, coming out of COVID, we had some really unusual things happen, right? Our 4-year drought in mortgage lasted like 4 years, but now I can tell because I was on a coaching call 2 weeks ago with 21 loan officers and the average closings was 15 first mortgages. I haven't seen numbers like that since COVID. So I just pay attention and I know that the new run has started. The new run is now. The new run actually started about 6 months ago, in my opinion. So now you have loan officers doing 10 loans a month, 12 loans a month, 15, 18, 25, 33. You see those numbers again. We didn't see those numbers a year ago, okay? So pay attention to those patterns so that we could take advantage. An example of a pattern, AI pattern. Look at NVIDIA. They had the market cornered. The company went up to be worth $4 trillion. That wasn't rocket science. It just wasn't, right? They had the only chip
that helped, not the only chip, but the leading chip that allowed people to do AI. So if you're an investor like me, I saw that. I put some money there and it did super well. Okay. So if I was a smaller investor, even if I put $5,000 in NVIDIA, it would have went up to be worth about $50,000 in about 3 years. So I don't think that's rocket science. That's just paying attention to what's going on. Okay. And be careful. I am not telling you to buy Netflix stock. I am not saying that. Okay. I'm not a financial advisor, but Netflix is getting into sports. So you're going to see that Netflix is cash rich. If you do a little bit of research, you find that out. And they're very strategic, right? And if you look at some of the things that they've done and how they've developed their company, if I'm a betting man, they're going to get into sports. I believe they just bought or are trying to buy 4 football games for this year. So they're going to get more people coming to Netflix. Look at what they're doing with sports fighting. They're the ones that get the sports rights on sports fights now, most commonly. So that's going to grow their revenue because that's a whole different area for them. And so their stock value is probably, if I'm a betting man, going to continue to increase. Okay. I'm just saying that not so you'll buy Netflix stock. I actually don't own any Netflix stock myself, but I'm just giving it as an example of a pattern that we can pay attention to so that we can make more money. An example, one more pattern. The baby boomers are now aging. And so the demand for care homes looks like this. So, I have a gentleman, I got involved in some care homes, big care homes. Why? Because the demand is going through the roof and we have a shortage of supply. So again, that's a pattern. Now, will that pattern change someday? Yeah, right? Baby boomers, the gluttony of aging 70 and 80-year-olds is not going to last forever. And it will change again, right? So I got to be smart about the pattern. So I think those being more direct and transparent is number one that I've learned from these two individuals. Number two, they're always selling. They're always doing money making activities. Number three, they're very strategic in that they pay attention to patterns, especially when it has to do with their business. That's 3 things. I could probably name about 15, but those are, if I were to pick the top 3 that they've gotten really good at, those are the top 3. And I hope that helps. This is something that can help any business person. So please share it with them and it'll be fun for them to listen to. Have a beautiful week. Talk to you soon.